Okay. I think we're back. So let me go back to the city and see where we are.
Special Magistrate, the city has decided to move forward today, and we are prepared to have our city witnesses testify. After the city witnesses, I don't know if you want to hear from opposing counsel, but we still have approximately 3 members of the public who would also still like to be heard. But
Okay.
we would like the city to present its argument before, to start everything out.
Okay, then I'm going to, we will proceed with the city's case, and we'll hear, once the city's concluded its case, then I'll go back to Mr. Stevens on how we proceed with his case.
Thank you, Magistrate. I just would like my objection noted for the record.
Your objection is noted, and let's go ahead and city can call its first witness in order. I would like to get a copy of the notice of violation and while I'm listening. Perfect, thank you.
Can I have a copy of what was provided too?
Yeah, for the record, this is the notice of violation.
I will ignore your marks. Thank you.
All right, let's proceed.
Good morning, Special Magistrate Alex Lopez with the City of West Palm Beach Code Enforcement. Your Honor, the violations pertaining to this property were brought to the city's attention by the neighboring residents regarding the non-permitted weekly wedding events taking place on the weekends at this residential parcel. This included the assembly of tents and equipment, increased parking on adjacent roads, increased foot traffic, loud music, and disassembling of the events affecting the neighboring residents' peace, quiet, and welfare. Upon research, it was also determined that the property was being advertised as an Airbnb on social media without a city-issued rental license and associated requirements. Furthermore, during my inspection of the exterior premises, I observed the placement of artificial turf on the majority of the property. This requires a building permit and inspection, which was not on city file. In total, the property was cited for FBC 105.1, the installation of artificial turf without an approved and issued building permit, FBC 110, the required building permit inspections, 18106K, and 74.4C4 for landscape maintenance, 18162A, rental of the premises to include Airbnb without an approved and issued rental license, 2232A, certificate of uses for rental license and on-site business operations, 82144, operating a business of wedding events and associated venues without an approved and issued business license, 94272B, the non-permitted operation of wedding events per the planning and zoning permitted use table, and for 94.6, the restrictions upon land, air rights, water, and structure for said venues. Your Honor, this property was cited on January 13th, 2020, with posting of the property taking place on January 14th, 2020. The notice was also delivered by way of certified and first-class mail. On January 15th, 2020, I responded via email to the property owner's attorney regarding the notice and its listed violations. On January 21st, 2020, I spoke with the owner, Mr. Katsaros, to schedule an inspection for that same day of the units as he had applied for the rental license. Mr. Katsaros coordinated the inspection time for me to meet his property manager, Brianne Ford, on site. During my inspection, I inspected all structures on site to include 4 individual units as Mr. Katsaros had listed on the rental application. However, it was brought to our attention that the parcel is recorded as having 2 units consisting of a single-family home and a garage with an apartment above it. Based on those findings, the rental license and certificate of use inspection failed and has not been issued. I also notified the building department regarding the extensive remodel work and lack of building permits to justify. During my conversation with the property manager, Brianne Ford, she informed me of a neighbor who continues to harass her at the property when a wedding event is being set up or when Brianne Ford would be with a future client, furthermore providing evidence of the events. Your Honor, at this time, I would like to introduce city staff to provide their testimony pertaining to their respective departments.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. Your testimony was that while you were on site for the inspection that ultimately didn't pass, Ms. Ford told you about a neighbor harassing her or bothering her. Did I understand that correctly?
That is correct,
okay,
yes.
I just want to make sure I heard you correct. Is that the conclusion of your testimony, Mr. Lopez?
Not of my testimony. I can finish my testimony if you like.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out if it would be appropriate for Mr. Stevens to ask you questions now, or if you're going to have other witnesses and then come back to you.
Normally, of course, the city usually presents its entire case before the other
No, I
side
know.
speaks.
It's not a normal case. Well, let me ask you, Mr. Stevens, do you prefer to wait to ask your questions of Mr. Lopez until he's completely finished, understanding there may be witnesses peppered in between?
It might be cleaner, just so we're not trying to remember what happened an hour ago, if I just maybe ask him the questions about what he's just testified to, and then we can continue.
I think
on.
that probably would keep the record cleaner as well. So let me go ahead and
Sure.
let Mr. Stevens ask you questions based on your testimony to that point, and then you can call your next witness.
Okay. It was Mr. Rivera?
Mr. Lopez.
Mr. Lopez. Now, specifically, I think you said that my client did apply for the rental and certificate of use license, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. When was that applied for?
I do not have that date before me. That would be a question for the business licensing supervisor.
How do you know that my client applied for those licenses?
I was informed by the business licensing supervisor that a permit license has been applied for.
Had those
Rental license.
licenses been approved, would that have cured some of the citations that were made against my client?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Had the rental license by the city and the certificate of use license by the city been approved, would that have cured any of the violations presently alleged against my client?
Yes.
Which ones?
It would cure Section 18162A and 22-32A, the certificate of use for that license.
Okay. Anything else? Any
That is
other of the violations that those two things would have cured?
No.
Okay. And again, from your understanding, were you involved in the rejection of those applications?
Yes.
Okay. In what capacity?
In the capacity that I observed 4 units versus the 2 units which are allowable on the parcel.
Okay. Had you not seen, again, this 4-2 issue, was there any other issue on the property that would have prevented you from issuing a certificate of use or the rental license?
For the rental license, no.
Okay. What about the certificate of use?
Pertaining to the rental license, no.
Okay. Now, from your perspective, what needs to be done to that unit in order to come into compliance, where there's again 4 kitchens where there should be 2?
That question would be better directed to our building official,
And the building official's name is?
Mr. Robert Brown.
From your perspective, if my client, strike that, let me ask you a different way. Assuming that my client corrects the violations that are on the alleged citation, is there anything preventing him from renting out his property to other people?
If I can answer that, yes, there is actually. He will not be issued a rental license while it's advertised as a wedding venue.
So how are we doing this with witnesses?
Yeah,
Can we just, I assume you'll be testifying at some point, can he?
I can hold that till later.
Okay.
yeah, let's let I know this is an administrative hearing, and it's not strict rules of procedure and evidence, but let's try and keep the question and answer to the same person.
Okay, so Mr. Lopez, the question was, assuming that these alleged violations were cured, is there anything that prevents my client from renting out his property to third parties?
To third parties?
Right.
No.
Okay. And specific to the violations that we're looking at on this January 13th, 2020, is there anything on it that specifically says that it is a violation for my client to allow a wedding to take place on his property?
Yes.
Which one?
That would be Code Section 94272B and Code Section 94-6.
Okay, now 94272B, that's for unpermitted tents, right?
That is for the, yes, it states the erection of tents, structures, equipment, et cetera, on this lot for public and/or private use of events, venues is not permitted per the Planning and Zoning Department.
Right, so back to my original question of if there's been a violation that says he can't have a wedding on his property. With respect to 94272B, your position is that if a tent is involved, that would make it a violation that would not allow him to move forward, right?
For the, and you're stating for the rental license?
For 94-272B.
That is correct.
Okay. Is it your understanding that my client has applied for permits for tents for the parties he's had recently?
I have heard, yes, that there has been an application put in place. I have not seen it for myself.
Okay. And do you have any knowledge as to whether or not those permits, or excuse me, those applications have been approved or denied?
I do not know.
Okay. Who would be the best person to ask about that?
That would be with, excuse me? That would be with the business licensing supervisor, Rachel Sargent.
Okay. So as you sit here today, do you know whether or not my client has come into compliance on 94272B with respect to obtaining licenses for any tents or permits for any tents that he's going to be using for his property?
Licenses, no, has not come into compliance with that.
Okay, but how do you know, if you've heard that he's made these applications and your testimony is here today, that you know that he's made these applications and you don't know whether or not they've been approved or denied? If they've been approved, then he would have come into compliance with that one violation, correct?
I have been informed by the Planning Zoning Department and Business Licensing Supervisor that that permit has been denied.
The tent permit has been denied.
No, the tent permit has been approved. That's a separate issue. That's with the building department.
Right.
But
So-
per the code 94272, that has been denied.
So again, I asked you earlier about, we're just talking about 94272B. And my understanding that was specifically related to him not applying for permits for the tents. And I believe you testified a few minutes ago that that was correct, that is the only issue with respect to that one violation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it is your understanding that he's applied for permits for those tents, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is it your testimony? Do you have direct knowledge as to whether or not he has been approved or denied those permits for those tents?
I do not have direct knowledge of that.
Okay, so as you sit here today, you cannot state affirmatively one way or the other whether or not he has come into compliance with that specific alleged violation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I believe you made mention a little while ago that one of the local neighbors was harassing one of my client's representatives. Is that right?
Say that again, please.
I believe you mentioned earlier that in one of your conversations with either my client or one of my client's representatives that a local neighbor was allegedly harassing one of my client's representatives?
My understanding is that his testimony was that the on-site manager, that was her characterization.
Right, but that was his testimony. I mean, again, can you tell me exactly what was told to you with respect to the neighbor? Did you take notes about it?
Yes, I did. I stated that during my conversation with the property manager, Brianne Ford, She informed me of a neighbor who continues to harass her at the property even when a wedding event is being set up or when Breanne Ford would be with a future client.
Okay, did she tell you the name of this neighbor?
Yes,
Okay, what was the name of the neighbor?
Mrs. by the name of Ann Lynch.
Okay, do you know Miss Lynch?
Met her for the first time today.
Okay, do you know where Miss Lynch lives?
Yes, she lives two streets south of the property of 717 Forest Hill.
Okay, I don't have any further questions for you right now, Mr. Lopez. Thank you.
Okay, I think you were going to have another staff member testify at this point, so go ahead.
Special Magistrate, if we could have Mr. Brown approach.
Special Magistrate Robert Brown, Building Official, City of West Palm Beach.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. On February 7th, 2020, I went to the property 717 Forest Hill Boulevard and issued a violation notice for having 4 residential units as opposed to 2. That is, as a building official, a permit needs to be submitted to the building department for that work, for the zoning review to be done to determine whether 4 units would be allowed at that location or whether it needed to be reverted back to 2 units. I have been told by planning staff that the zoning code would require for it to be reverted back to 2 residential units. I cited for the work that had been performed to create the 4 residential units. It was unpermitted work. We don't have any plans on record that would support a permit application for 4 units. Therefore, the work was done without permit and without inspection. I cited for Florida Building Code section 105.1, which is performing work without a permit, and I cited for Florida Building Code section 110.1, which is performing construction without required inspections. The concern obviously there is that if it has not been inspected by licensed inspectors, the concern is for life safety and welfare of those who are in and around the property. That's why it was cited. I would say that we also do handle the special event permits, and as the Respondents' Council has said, I notified the respondent that no special event permit will or can be issued until the violations have been resolved. And so that's something that they have been aware of. A special event permit can also incorporate tent permits. Those are issued, both the special event and tent permits are issued for a single event. So any tent permit application that was made for prior events would not apply to upcoming events. It's a single use permit, just a special event and a tent permit. I wanted to clarify that because I heard there's some discussion about tent permits. The fire marshal looks at tent permits to see that the tent fabric has the certification for spread of flame. That's the primary issue we're looking at there. The event permit itself, the special event permit, gets a review from planning staff and from building staff overall. So we are looking at whether it can comply from the zoning perspective, whether it can comply from the building perspective for a special event, one-time use only. And as I think we've discussed already today, there has been no special event permit for the upcoming event.
There is not.
There is not.
Okay. Before additional questions, is there a picture in the file that, I'm trying to visualize the 4 units versus the 2 units. Is there something that I can see to?
Back up one. No, the photos that you just had. Special Magistrate, that photo that you're looking at right there, that is the
So again,
single-family home.
since Mr. Brown is
Yeah.
the
All
witness.
all
let me
right, yeah,
have
I
him
can,
walk
I
me
can,
through
I can
Thank
take
you.
that. So that's a photograph of the main structure, the main house. And within that main structure, there is a single kitchen. Therefore, that would be considered one residential unit. And there are really 3 structures on this property that are being used for, as residential units. So we're not talking, I think there is a shed structure as well. We're not talking about that. But the main house has a kitchen, as it would. There is a separate structure to the right of the main house, which is referred to as the studio. I think some of the online information refers to it as the studio. That is in our permit records as not having a range or cooking facility, although it does have countertop and a kitchen, but our records show that there is no range, no cooking facility permitted for that studio building, which is to the east of the main house. However, we do have the photographs from the websites which clearly show that there's a kitchen in there, and I think Alex Lopez has seen the kitchen with the cooking facility. To the west of the main house, to the west and towards the rear of the property, is what is a standalone 2-story structure. And I think those are being referred to on the website as studio. Not studio, no, not studio. Maybe carriage house. There's a kitchen on the first floor, and there's a kitchen on the second floor of that building. So those are the 3rd and 4th kitchens. So the property needs to be reverted back to a configuration where there's 2 kitchens.
Yeah, let me stop you. It's like in this picture I'm looking at. Oh, that picture. Tell me.
So that structure to the left is the 2-story building that has a kitchen on the first floor and a kitchen on the second
What you
floor.
were referring to as the carriage house?
I believe that's how it's referred
Okay.
to. I think it's referred to that way.
Then
Or
behind
actually, I think it's upper loft and lower loft, something like that on the website. But it's there's a kitchen on each of those 2 floors.
And then behind that was,
That view that we were just looking at, that's looking towards the east.
so then there's the shed that you're not concerned about.
That's
behind.
correct.
And then beside the shed is what? There's like a
So on the right-hand side of that photograph is the main house. We see in the back of the main house, and then behind that, in the background, we see the studio building.
with the awning.
Yes, and that studio building has. I'm not sure if that awning is attached to that building, but the building at the very back, with the flat roof, that is the studio building, and that also has had a range installed, which would mean electrical wiring to install that range. So 2 of those kitchens, the cumulative 4 kitchens, 2 of them would need to be removed with the electrical wiring removed before, under the zoning code, they would be considered as no longer being a kitchen and therefore no longer creating a separate residential unit.
Okay, so I'm clear. You have the main 2-story residence, which was originally built and permitted.
Yes.
You have the building behind that, which has a kitchen that was not permitted.
There's
It's not the one that was.
So if you're saying behind, you're probably referring to the 2-story building,
Let's
which
go back to the picture of the exterior of all the buildings.
the picture looking east.
Okay.
That'll work,
so
yeah. So the
Over on
building,
the right, that's the main residence, permitted, not,
yes,
okay, then behind that, there's that, the
two-story.
door, no, it looks like one story. to me. It
Okay,
has an
behind,
awning
okay,
on it.
right. So that is actually beside the main house because we're looking east.
Okay.
But yes, okay, so that is the studio building to the east of the main house. That our permit records show as not having a kitchen.
Okay, and then the building that we talked about is calling the carriage house or the loft.
Right. That now has two kitchens in it, one upstairs, one downstairs.
And your records show should have only one.
Only one.
Gotcha, all right. Okay,
Can I just add that there is other work that we believe has been performed on the property in general, rather than just the kitchens, because there is the civil case that the respondent has filed claiming compensation for well over $100,000 worth of work. So our understanding is if that work, $100,000 plus worth of work was done, we don't have any permit record for it at all.
okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Stevens, do you have questions for Mr. Brown?
Yes, I do. Good morning, Mr. Brown.
Good morning.
As I asked one of your colleagues earlier, do you know if the issues we're talking about with this house, whether there should be 2 versus 4 kitchenettes, was already in place when my client acquired that property?
I don't know.
Okay. So it is possible that it was already like that and my client didn't do that work to make this structure non-conforming?
That is possible.
Okay. Now, with respect to event permits, is there a separate permit that would be applied for a tent?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have a role in those applications for tents?
Only that I oversee the staff who take those in and issue the permit, and we also coordinate reviews that are performed by the fire department on those.
Are you operating like a 30,000-foot view of the whole thing, or does every application
They're more
for a
like
tent-
27,000 foot.
27,000 feet? Okay, so if I submit an application for a tent permit, unless I'm asking for something bonkers, you're probably never going to know about it, right?
That's correct.
Okay. In this case, were you brought into the loop for any of the tent applications that my client applied for the past, say, 6 weeks?
I was brought into the loop because of the overall concern about the property being used for events. Therefore, we did look at all aspects of what permits had been applied for and what hadn't. I do believe that there was some early tent permit applications for early events, but I'm confident that there's no tent permit applied for the most recent event, which apparently was going on till 2 o'clock this morning, or for the upcoming event this coming weekend. To my knowledge, there's no tent permit application for those.
Okay, I know that we're using the city's computer to put stuff up. Are we able to pull up permits that are pending before the city right now? If I give you a permit number?
Well, can we look by address, and then we'll see all of the permits?
Okay. And I have a permit number when you're ready.
I'm going to look up the address.
Okay.
These are all the permits on that property, sir. Look it up. These are all the permits.
Okay, so it's permit number 2002-0213.
That permit is in applied status not issued.
Right. I believe a minute ago you just testified that you believe that he had not applied for a tent permit for this weekend, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. Can you open that one up? Is that for a tent?
That's for a tent for an event with the date being put up on February 28th. Take it down on March 1st.
That's this weekend, right?
That would be this weekend, yeah.
Okay. And has that permit application been denied?
If we go to plan review, it looks like it has been passed by the fire department.
Okay. Who else needs to pass this for this to be approved?
On a tent, for a tent permit, just the fire department needs to pass it.
Okay, so in theory, since they have now passed for this permit for the tent for this weekend, they would not be in violation of section 94-272-B for this weekend, correct?
With respect to the tent, yes.
Okay,
So the fire marshal is looking for surface spread of flame on the tent.
okay. From your perspective, you've actually communicated quite a bit with my client, would you say
Yes.
that? Okay. And I assume you deal with a lot of residents trying to deal with code violations over time, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Would you characterize my client's efforts to be being diligent trying to resolve these issues with you?
Communicative, yes. I mean, I've had to remind him to obtain permits for the exterior electrical work that he told me about in his first conversation that we had.
Right.
And I had to remind him to get an electrical contractor to get a permit for that.
I understand.
And between those times, other events were held at the property. So communicative, yes. I would not necessarily say, diligent.
Okay. But he did actually get an electrician involved and pulled a permit for that, did he?
After my second asking, yes. And that still has not been inspected as of late last week. Getting a permit is one thing, but we really need to get it inspected to make sure it's safe.
Okay. Now, with respect to one of these violations, I believe, deals with turf. Are you familiar with that?
AstroTurf?
Yes.
As far as talking with Alex about that.
Okay. So is that not in your purview?
It is. It's actually a zoning code matter, but the permit is issued through our department, so I can speak on it.
Okay. So now, with respect to turf, a resident needs to apply for a permit to install turf?
AstroTurf, yes.
AstroTurf. What's the difference between turf?
Well, it's
and
artificial turf.
Okay. Well, is turf, is there different types of turf?
Yeah, artificial turf and real turf.
All right. So with respect to the one that we're talking about, this is AstroTurf?
This is, yeah, artificial turf.
Okay. Now, do you know what the issue has been with his specific turf that he has and why there's been a struggle with it?
There has to be, you have to show what the kind of artificial turf it is. There's a listing for the turf. Now, I believe this turf was bought pre-owned, and there may not be easy access to a listing or certification for what kind of turf material that is.
Okay, because it's recycled turf.
Reused turf.
Okay. And has my client been working with you to try and figure out a way to satisfy the city's needs with respect to that turf?
I haven't been involved in discussions directly with your client on the artificial turf.
Okay. Who was having the discussions with my client about the artificial turf?
Maybe Ray Caranci? Ray Caranci, the landscape planner?
Okay. And again, everything you've told us so far about the turf, it's from, I'm sorry, what was his name?
Well, I spoke with Alex about the turf, and also briefly with Ray Caranci, who is the city's landscape planner.
Okay. Okay. I've already asked some of your colleagues, but from your perspective, again, if these alleged violations were satisfied, is there anything that you're aware of that would prevent my client from holding a wedding, for example, on his property?
Okay, so in order to have weddings repeatedly on a property, it'd either have to be an event hall property or it'd have to be a residential property for which a special event permit is issued.
Okay.
So it'd have to go one of those two routes.
And I believe he was cited on here for not having a special event permit, right?
Correct.
Okay, so again, assuming that he did obtain a special event permit, and again, all of these alleged violations having been cured, is there anything that you are aware of that would prevent him from, again, having a wedding on his property?
I'd have to leave that to the city attorney's office and the director of the development services, because I know they are in discussion as to whether the legality of repeated wedding events or events on the property in a residential area.
So it would be fair to say that you don't have an opinion on it one way or the other?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown, I don't have any further questions for you.
Okay.
All right, anything else from the city?
Yes, just to be clear, because he's made great pains at pointing out nobody's sure when the two units were converted. The current owner does inherit the violation even if they didn't put it in, correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question. Could you please say it again?
Just to be clear that, since you weren't able to say with any certainty that this owner did that conversion of those 2 units, is it correct that whoever owns it now still inherits that violation?
Yeah, the owner of the property the onus would be upon them to do due diligence before purchasing the property to make sure work that has been done is permitted. Ultimately, whoever did the work, it still represents a risk to health and safety if it's not inspected and deemed to meet the minimum requirements of the code. So the current owner would be responsible for getting that work permitted, whether they did that work or not.
One last question, Robert. Regarding tent permits, I know there's a stop work order issued at this time. You've already testified to that. Would a tent permit even be issued while that stop work order is in effect?
It's possible that could happen. Yeah, it's possible that could happen, but the stop work order is with respect to the unpermitted work for creating those kitchens. The tent permit being reviewed by the fire department is looking at the safety of the tent standalone. So there's a special event permit that goes along with that, and that is what we have said will not be issued. A special event permit.
Mr. Stevens, do you have any follow-up questions based on those?
Yes, Magistrate, just briefly. Does the city treat nonconformities and how what consequences there are for these property owners, depending on whether the property owner that's being cited actually did the work causing the nonconformity, rather than if they inherited it?
If a property owner inherits unpermitted work, the city does not assess a penalty on obtaining those permits.
Okay.
Whereas if a property owner owned the property at the time of the work being done, they would be subject to a penalty for obtaining the permits after the fact.
And I think that's, if what we have on the screen right here talks about how there's going to be, I believe it was this document, some type of like quadruple the penalty, quadruple the fee and whatnot.
Yes, that's the last check mark there says pay 4 times the permit fee. Okay. If it can be shown that it was a prior owner who did that work, then that would be the 4 times the fee penalty would be waived.
Okay, but again, as we sit here today, I've been asking everybody, do you have any evidence that it was my client that actually created this non-conforming structure?
I have no evidence either way.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions from Mr.
Okay,
Brown.
thank you, Mr. Brown. Next witness.
Excuse me. We would next call Rachel Sargent. The city would also like to make sure that the special magistrate is aware of a clarification on, with respect to what's been brought out on 94-272B, that is not just about tents, but that a wedding venue is not a permitted use in a residential district. So I thought that was quite unclear and just wanted to make that clarified going forward.
Well, if that, I would make
Say that again.
Sure. In other words, 94-272B has been cited. So a wedding venue, which they appear to be using this as a wedding venue, that is a non-permitted use in a residential district. So part of that violation encompasses that aspect.
So your argument will be that 272B captures the tent, but also captures the big picture, the event
Yes,
in
sir.
and of itself.
Yes, sir.
All right, you'll be able to argue that. So.
Magistrate, if I'm going to then, if that's the position they're going to take with respect to that violation, I intend to move to dismiss it based on ambiguity or not enough clarity in what has been cited in this. Would you like to preserve that for later?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Let's go ahead with this witness.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rachel Sargent. I am the Permit and Tax Supervisor. Rachel Sargent.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so for my part, I had received a call from Joey, the property owner, regarding the rental tax portion of this case, and I had suggested to him to fill out the application and and that we would process the application as we do all other applications for rental tax. And I have a copy of the rental tax application that he provided, and it's date stamped January 14th, 2020. And then, as we do with all rental tax applications, we process it and we attach some inspections to the certificate of use, which is tied to the rental tax, and we schedule the inspections. And that's when Alex Lopez, who is the code officer for that zone, went out and did an inspection on the property for minimum housing standards, and as well to match what was put on the application. And so that's what's been in question here. The application states 4 units when the property, according to zoning, is only allowed 2 units.
Is the document that you're speaking about, is the city introducing that or as part of the record?
I'm so sorry.
Since it's been referred to, Magistrate, I would like it made part of the record, so it's just a clean record.
Yeah, I already know what it looks like.
Okay, without objection, this is rental tax application, certificate of use application for 717 Forest Hill Boulevard, dated January 14th, 2020. Okay.
And on the application, it notes the 4 units. And so, while I was on the phone, and I apologize, I don't remember the exact date, but when I was on the phone with the property owner, I had instructed him that if he was going to use it for vacation rental, that also requires a state license, which is regulated by the Department of Business and Professional Regulations, and that he'd have to go on their website and apply for the vacation dwelling license in order to have the vacation rental privileges, which I understand that he did, and he has received the license from the state. And he did provide us, well, we're able to look that stuff up online, so I was able to see it online, and I believe it's in the file. But he also has to comply with the inspections, the zoning inspection and the code inspection, which he did not pass. And so that's kind of when Mr. Brown, the building official, got involved with like the non-conforming use in terms of the building permits. So it was to my knowledge that the property owner was working on getting the building permits organized, submitted, inspected, so that he could comply with the regulation, the zoning regulation for just the 2 units. Then he could reapply for the rental tax and put 2 for number of units, and then, conceivably pass the inspection and get his rental tax certificate of use with the option to vacation rental. And I explained that to Joey on the phone. Now, he did also submit some other applications to me, like, for instance, the business tax application for the wedding venue, and also some special event permit applications. However, when it was discovered that the building permits had not been secured and that there could be a public safety issue because of that, as a department, we decided to not move forward with granting any further permits on the property until that public safety issue was addressed through a proper building permit and inspection.
And that public safety issue, so that I'm clear, is the 4 units versus 2.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, go ahead.
On the business tax side, regarding the wedding venue, I had one conversation with him about that, and basically the way that a business tax application would work is if I had if there was a business in the city of West Palm Beach who was going to be, their nature of business is to promote events and to have events wherever, either with facilities or without facilities, it would be my intention to put them into an annual business tax receipt. That I wouldn't characterize it as a special event, that this is the nature of your business, and that you need an annual business tax receipt, just as all other businesses do in the city of West Palm Beach. So that's kind of where things, stopped and became sort of gray area about how he was going to apply for that. He did put on the special, I should bring a copy, I believe it's in the record, but there is a business tax application that he submitted that states that he is a small wedding venue, small event venue. Because the address is 7174 Forest Hill Boulevard, zoning, it's my understanding that zoning would not pass that because it's not built and designed to be a wedding venue or a venue. It's single-family SF7.
All right.
So I did not move forward with the business tax application.
And can you clarify for me, the business tax application was or was not for the annual versus the piecemeal?
Yeah, it was for the annual.
It was for the annual.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I can get a copy of that business tax application that he submitted.
But the concern is that, given the location and the zoning district, that would not be a permissible use of the property, that an annual business tax receipt could be issued regardless.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So that's when we move towards special event applications, which again, as a business tax official, I wouldn't characterize even a monthly event as being a special event in the city of West Palm Beach.
That would be more like an annual?
An annual, yes. And we do have, several businesses in the city that utilize that business tax annual category to do that type of work.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else, ma'am?
No, sir?
All right, then I'm
Questions?
sure Mr. Stevens has a question or two for you.
Thank you, Magistrate. Good afternoon, Ms. Sargent.
Hi.
Just so we can keep the trend going here, do you have any personal knowledge that my client did the non-conforming work that you've been hearing about today related to the 4 versus 2 kitchens in that structure?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, with respect to, do you have any information about the tent applications? Is that not, or is that not your thing?
Well, I have the same information that Robert Brown gave. I mean, our department, the building division, does take in the application, and it gets a fire review through the fire department, and they're looking for just safety as far as the tent is concerned.
Okay, and so you saw that permit we had up on the screen a minute ago?
Yes.
And you saw that that the city had approved tents for this weekend?
Yes, I know that the city has issued temporary tent permits for that property more than once.
Okay. And again, just asking everybody that's going to come up here today, do you have an opinion one way or the other if my client was to satisfy the alleged violations that have been brought against him, whether or not he'd be permitted to have a wedding, say, on his property?
Again, I'll say what everybody else says. I can't say one way or the other until legal, I guess, weighs in onto whether or not a special event permit would be appropriate on the residential property.
When a resident of the city rents out their property to a third party, and that third party then decides to throw a party on that property, is that something that the city permits?
Yes, yes. I mean, you could apply for the permit. We would have to, look at the permit. There's a lot of, if you look at our special event permit application, there are things like music, alcohol, tents, parking, and all those things would have to go through the proper divisions in order to be approved, in order to have such event there. I personally am not aware of any special event permits that are happening on residential property, particularly by a third party who's not the primary resident in the city of West Palm Beach.
Does the city impose any type of limitations in the number of special permits that they allow for events on any given property?
Not at this time.
Okay. You say that as though that is being considered to put a limitation on it?
Yes,
Okay. But as you're testifying right now, there is no limitation in place, correct?
that is correct.
Okay. Okay. With respect to this property, from the testimony that we've heard so far, and you've been in the room for all of it so far, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It seems that the holdup primarily for getting specifically either the special event permit or these rental licenses or the certificate of use has been this nonconformity on the structure. Is that what you've heard?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of any other reason why any of these permits or certificates have not been issued to my client other than, again, this 4 versus 2 kitchenette issue in this one structure?
Not at this time.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I don't have any more questions for you. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
Any other questions from the city for this witness? Sorry, I wasn't.
Rachel, just to be clear, based on what you've said so far, the nonconformity, if fixed, would allow for rental license and COU for that purpose.
Yes. The nonconformity of fix would allow for the rental tax, local business tax, the certificate of use, and the vacation rental.
Would it allow for a business tax for a wedding venue?
No.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, would it allow for a
Business tax for a wedding venue.
business tax for a wedding venue?
Business tax license, sorry.
With local business tax.
But it would allow for my client to rent out his property to third parties who, if they then decided to have a party on that property, they would be allowed to submit an application for a special event permit, correct?
Yes, they could submit an application for consideration, yes.
And at this time, there's nothing that the city has in place to prevent a third party from doing that, correct?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, there's nothing in place, or no, that's not correct? I just want to be sure.
Oh, no, there's nothing in place.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Sargent.
You're
No
welcome.
further questions.
Okay. Next witness?
Could we actually take a recess for just a couple minutes?
Sure, let's, it's 12:15. Let's come back at 12:25. Is that enough time? 12:20. Okay, let's go off the record.